Welcome to another exciting episode of Many Hats of Business, the podcast. I'm your host, Tanya Gordon, and I'm thrilled to have you with us today. On this podcast, we explore the realities of business and the many hats we have to wear. I'll be speaking to some fantastic business owners about their journey to where they are today, in the hope that they inspire you to go through the tough times so that you get to relish the rewards having your own business can bring. Before we jump in, a quick reminder to subscribe, rate and leave a review if you enjoy what you hear. Your support means the world to us and helps Many Hats of Business, the podcast, reach even more curious minds like yours. Alright, let's get started. Get ready to be entertained, informed and inspired. This is Many Hats of Business, the podcast. Hi, Nicole. Thanks so much for joining us. If you can introduce yourself and tell the listeners a bit about you, that'd be brilliant.
Well, thank you for having me, first of all. Thank you for having me here. And yeah, a little bit about me. So I'm Nicole Louise Winer. That's wine with an R for anyone who's not sure how to spell it or how to say it. And I've been running my business for 4 years full-time with this business that I have, 6 years otherwise. I have had another business before. My first business I set up in 2018, and then I went full-time with this business in 2020. Nothing to do with the pandemic. I'm a business mentor, coach and strategist, and I support mostly online service-based entrepreneurs to grow and scale their business without doing the things that make them want to get back into bed. So the things where you have to hustle, or you have to feel like you're working really hard. And I'm not here to tell you that you don't have to do hard work, because that's just not true. So you might, but you can make it feel easier. And what happens with lots and lots of my clients is they find that when it starts to feel easier, they start to gain momentum and do things that really move the needle without being too Instagram cheesy as a phrase of moving the needle, because it's the stuff that you can really get in your own way about when it feels hard. So I'm here to make it feel easier, but also share the practical strategies with you that I've seen work for me and for hundreds of my clients. That's what I do.
And for you, what was it that made you want to set up in business? Because I know you're ex-corporate, aren't you?
Yeah, so I worked at HSBC for over a decade, which when people, if you're watching this on video or if you go and stalk us and have a look after this, I know I look too young to tell you about this experience, right? But I have good genes, so thanks, Mum. I was in HSBC for over 10 years. I moved around there. I did lots of different roles across retail, commercial and trade, in marketing, risk, business management, like loads of different departments.
Yeah,
I know about.
Interrupt you talking about really technical stuff, but I am actually looking at you on the screen right now, and you look like you're not old enough to have had a business for 4 years, let alone the experience before it.
It's that, and I get that a lot whenever I do like masterclasses or live sessions with people, and I give that kind of intro, and I can see people's faces going, but this can't really add up. Like when I say I've studied psychology for nearly 2 decades, they're like, but you're not old enough to have even studied it.
5.
Yeah, which like I said, good genes. I did get ID'd for the lottery on the 2 days before or after my 36th birthday. So I was chuffed about that. And I said to the lady, we're going to play this game. So if I come back in here and buy a ticket, you need to ask me for my ID again, because it feels really good. So just keep doing that. That's like, I like it. But yeah, to answer your question, I was at HSBC, like I said, for 10 years, in their head office, did all these different roles. And then the thing for me, there was a couple of things going on, really. We were moving from Essex to Hertfordshire, which meant that the commute would look a little bit different. My nan needed a lot more care. She's got dementia. She's in a home now. But when I first left corporate and set up my business, I was also caring for her full time. So she needed a lot more support. And the third thing was really, which is a big story part of my business, actually, that my parents ran a business since I was the catalyst, I think, to them starting that and wanting their own freedom in a very, very different industry to what we're in. And they worked all the time. So they worked evenings and weekends. They were in catering. So again, like they were working when other people were socialising. So I spent a lot of time with my grandparents growing up. And even though the business and that my parents created and ran gave us an incredible life, you can't get time back. And that was one of the things that I saw in corporate as well. No matter how much I tried to help the execs and the departments streamline, and that's what I was there to do, right? Streamline, manage staff as a business manager or an EA, manage the teams, manage capacity, and they'd be getting paid like, crazy money and crazy bonuses, but they never had any time to spend with their loved ones, to go to the school play, to be able to get home for bath time, to look after their own health, you know, like, and that kind of stuff. And for me, I wanted to make that change, and I tried bloody hard when I was in corporate to change it, but it was a monster, right? The culture was just a monster. So when I set my business up, my first business was a VA business, and I wanted to help people who wanted to grow their businesses and do that whilst they weren't working all the hours. And obviously that meant they were outsourcing to me, so I was helping them to really helping them to do that. And then it kind of developed, really. Like I said, I've studied psychology for nearly 2 decades. I was coaching and mentoring all of my clients for free, lucky them, at the start. Part of imposter syndrome for me as well. And then I decided to take it full time with the coaching and mentoring in, like I said, in 2020.
Was it, one of the things I wanted to pick up on that, was it difficult when you were closing your VA business, because people have grown to completely rely on you? And I imagine, like, in your corporate world, you were helping people, you know, you've seen that with your parents, of that helping people and things like that. And then it must have been quite tough to walk away from.
Yeah, it was. I did feel very guilty at the time, and there was a lot of other guilt stuff. I mean, you know, caring for my nan, I'm a giver. Like, I like to help people. That's what I like to do. But I made the transition as smooth as I possibly could for those clients, where I'd started to kind of scale my time differently. They were already working. I had an agency model, like an associate model, where I had associate VAs working for me as well, like helping to manage the clients. So some of them were able to take on the clients full time, or I was able to recommend somebody else that they might want to help them as well. And some of those clients came to work with me for mentoring and for coaching, and then we would look to find another VA or somebody else to support them with the outsourcing side, because they wanted more of the coach and mentor me rather than the VA me. So,
which, as I imagine, yes, you'd been coaching some people like for free when you were building up anyway, but also for those that you weren't technically coaching, you would still have been coaching as part of your giving nature, wouldn't you, I suppose?
Well, and that's the part that happened, actually. So I wasn't giving it away for free intentionally. It wasn't that I was like, okay, let's have a free, I'll give this session to you and I'll just include it. It was happening because I was having these strategic conversations with people to help them with, like, planning what was coming next, looking at the strategy of the business, the marketing, the sales, and all of that kind of side. And I was giving them a lot of advice. And I was also giving them a lot of advice if the same thing was coming up time and time again, and that pattern recognition that I've got as an ADHD person anyway, but from my coaching and psychology side, where I was like, okay, but we've been trying to work on this for 6 months. What's going on? Is it really the goal? So they were getting so much of a coach and a mentor, and it was just being charged at my VA rate, which was crazy.
Lucky, like I said, lucky them. and it is crazy, isn't it? But I imagine it's actually really common. And, for people listening, they can see you're further along in your journey. You did it, and they could be doing it right now as well. So from a mindset point of view, or did you have a coach to get you out of that? How did you make that change on the charging point of view of charging your worth per se?
Well, for me, it was the difference between, I wasn't a VA anymore. So I wasn't charging a VA rate. I was charging a rate for coaching and strategic advice. Like, it was very different. And I had a lot of internal conflict come up for me around being able to call myself a coach in the first place, because I'm an academic. I like learning. I wouldn't say necessarily I'm academic. I find learning quite hard, but I'm very much about, like, professional qualifications and all of that kind of stuff. And it does matter to me. So I hadn't done a coaching qualification, and I was like, I can't, call myself a coach because I haven't done a qualification in this. And actually, I did start calling myself a coach on the mindset side before I did my formal training, because I started looking at, okay, someone could go and do a weekend course, like, for a couple of hours, and then technically call themselves a coach, right? At that point, I'd done 6,500 hours study just to get my psychology BSc. So I was like, get out of your own way and stop now, right? Because it's just silly. And then looking at, like, I remember one client when I had the VA business, and I think I'd been working with him. He was my biggest client. He had 3 businesses. We've been working together for about 6 months, and I was helping him to, like, recoup debt that accrued over years because the systems weren't in place and the people weren't in place to understand how to have those conversations. And I put out this blog post and it said something around helping him to like save 20k in 6 months or get back 20k. And he saw, I didn't tell him, I did it as an anonymous sort of case study. And he wrote back to me and he was like, you do know it was close to like 100k, right? And I was like, oh my God, like, was it? So I was already feeling this now. Yeah, feel free to, what gift do I get for that? But yeah, it was, I was already doing that for people. I was already, that isn't an admin-based job to save and get back that kind of cash, right? Cash money. So there was the mindset side that was coming up telling me, you're not good enough, you're not ready, you're not qualified. And then I started to look at the evidence of, well, you are, like, and you're making excuses because of X, Y, and Z. And to answer your question about did I work with a coach, it's really interesting you say this because I was thinking about this on my drive home from my yoga class on Tuesday, and I need to write a post to credit somebody who really helped me, who doesn't realise how much that she did. And I had a conversation with her in lockdown. It was a Saturday morning. She was a messaging and marketing expert, and we were quite close, and she sort of said to me, let's just have a chat. And we were talking about what I was doing, and she sort of said to me, but Nicole, you're already coaching, you're already doing this. And I was like, yeah, I know, but it just feels like, I shouldn't really call myself that, blah blah blah. And she gave me this task to do, which I give lots of my clients to do now if they're feeling the imposter syndrome. Write a personal CV. So this isn't something you have to share anywhere else, but of all of the reasons that you're already great at this thing, doing this thing, at this skill, whether it's your skills or whether it's your personality and your preferences, which both come into that. So that's when I was like, right, 6,500 hours just for my psychology BSc. That doesn't include what I did at A-level or GCSE. That doesn't include what I've done in between and since. That doesn't include today, that doesn't include anything to do with all the hours I've done to get my ICF accreditation and all of the coaching hours I've put in with clients. So for me, it's always, and maybe this is an ADHD thing as well, but it really does help to come back to the evidence and then comparing that to the story you're telling yourself, which is just like, it's a story. And where does the story come from? Is this story serving you? What do you gain from holding on to that narrative versus being like, do you know what? Also, what's the worst that can happen? Like, the likelihood is you're not going to die.
Yeah.
That's the worst case
scenario. At home, it is unlikely, isn't it?
Very, unless you're incredibly clumsy or I don't know. Right. But you're not. So our brains, and I'm sure you've spoken about this on the podcast with other people as well, that our brains are there to keep us safe. That's what they do. But the threats that we now understand from a social, they're not running away from a lion or a tiger or a bear or trying to in that survival mode, but the social threats of being judged, being shamed, who does she think she is? They're the things that were coming up in the stories for me. And it's very normal to feel like they are the threats you associate with, I'm going to die. This is a real threat to my life. And it's not.
Yeah, no, that's such a good point, isn't it? Because like you say, there is no real danger, but we perceive it as like, genuinely, when you first start putting yourself out there, it is a full-blown panic, isn't it? It's not. And when you look back at some of the times when you felt like that, it's easy to beat yourself up and to think, that's ridiculous. But we've all done it and we've all been in that place. And everyone that comes on the journey after us will be in that place at some stage. So it's that time spent going through it, isn't it, at the end of the day? But it's part of like the change curve as well of that. Like it's weird because it's an event we're putting on ourselves. No one's forcing us to go and change our role and jump out into the big wide world and all of that. But our body doesn't really know that. Our mind doesn't know that. So you still go through all of those emotions of the denial and before you get to acceptance and then go, okay, the big girl pants are on, let's do this.
Well, there's something you just said there about choice, which I always find really interesting because when we're in that fight or flight mode, our amygdala's taking over, right? And we feel like we don't have a choice at that point because survival is the only option. However, you are choosing to stay in that threat state. And I know that can feel really hard to hear, especially if right now you're having a particularly difficult time. right, with mindset or whatever else. But everything you do as a human being is a choice. So you can choose for that to be different. You can choose for that to be different. Like, that is within your power.
Yeah. And it's like you say, that is difficult, isn't it, to think. And I'm an eternal optimist, but there's obviously a lot of people that are exactly the opposite. So for somebody that is in that mindset as well, and they might be naturally more pessimistic, it's very difficult to understand that, really, you say, I'm choosing to feel like this. So
It's a choice. And the brilliant thing with understanding it as a choice is that you have the power to change it, because you have the power to make a different choice. So let's go with your example just there, where you said, right, well, you're an eternal optimist, which is great. I need more eternal optimists in my life because I am inherently negative. Like, I've got Jewish blood. Like, that's just how I am. Like, I'm a shit Jew, but I'm Jewish by blood. So it's in me somewhere to just be this inherent negative person and think of all the bad things and the worst case scenarios, and the ADHD comes into that. But that's a choice to stay in that place of seeing everything as limiting, everything as a threat, everything as a challenge, but a challenge in a negative way rather than something that you can learn from and do something with and change and choose different. Like,
I imagine for you, studying psychology really helped with that, because, like you say, every business journey is different, every person's journey is different with everything, isn't it? But me and you, if we were starting off at the same point, which, we're not, because not everyone's different, but if you were, hypothetically, because everyone's got comparisonitis and they don't judge each other from the same point, but let's pretend we're at the same point.
Yeah.
A fair competition with, let's face it, it's never going to happen, but if it was, you have at the same starting point a far more difficult barrier to go past than I would, because I naturally am more optimistic about things. So if you do have that self-awareness, and I was talking to a visibility coach about this the other day on the podcast, about that self-awareness in business makes a massive difference, because you were self-aware, you knew, right, okay, I'm naturally going to struggle and be more pessimistic anyway, and you put in all that studying to understand, which yes, helps your clients, but it massively helps you as well to understand your own behaviour and then stop yourself getting in your own way.
So true. And it's so funny you say that about the psychology stuff, because I was already really aware of that. And I remember, it doesn't happen as much anymore because I challenge my family on it, but they'd always say to me, stop unpicking that, stop picking out the language, stop, because I'd be like, but you're choosing that, but that's, and they'd say to me, well, stop doing that. And then after studying, and doing my coach certification as well, again, that just deepened my level of self-awareness in a different way. So yeah, it does help me, of course, support my clients, but actually it helps me because I work with a coach, and I work with a number of different coaches. I've got a therapist, I've got a coach supervisor, I'm in a mastermind peer group. Like I'm always looking for other people to give me a different stance on how I'm looking at things, which again, you can then choose to accept or reject, or say, actually, you know what, which tends to work for me, especially with the ADHD, that bit's kind of ringing true, but not completely. So that's kind of like a part of it, but this part applies here. The other thing I'd say is, if that is something that you find particularly tricky, is to surround yourself with people who are not going to create an echo chamber of agreeing with you, because I think that can be really limiting. Of course, we need cheerleaders and we need people to champion us. And there's, I don't mean joining spaces that just put you down and make you feel like obviously not, but places where you are encouraged but challenged to challenge your thinking, challenge the opportunity, challenge the plans that you've got. Are you playing too small? Are you going too big? What's going on? And not creating just an echo chamber of yes people.
Yeah, because yes people would be far more comfortable to be around, wouldn't they? I imagine, at times in those groups you must have thought, what the bloody hell am I doing? This is torture, on some days, but then at least with that advice you're getting, it's solid advice, isn't it? Because when they do go, oh yeah, that's the right thing, you know that they're not just saying that because you've heard them challenge on other occasions. So that's really useful for people, isn't it? What would you say has been the biggest challenge for you in business?
I'd probably say, again, interestingly, as somebody who loves to learn, it's probably knowledge. So I think there's this big, obviously I'm a coach and a mentor, right? So I've got two sides of how I look at this. As a coach, you believe that somebody has all of the answers within them. As a mentor, I don't think that's true. Like, and you're resourceful as a human being to find the answers or to ask the questions, to get the answers, or to go out there and find the answers to the questions. Like that's you as how I see that in humanity. But you only know what you know. So what would hold me back is, especially when I started leaning more into like the personal development space, which if you've got a business and you're online, like you're going to be exposed to some of that. And some of the things that you'll hear is you're exactly where you're meant to be. Like you have all the answers, coach, you have all the answers inside you. So what that can really do, and that it did for me, was stop me asking for help. It stops me saying, actually, do you know what? I have a gap here, and I have a knowledge gap here, or I have a skill gap here, or I have a mindset gap here, or whatever it was. And actually like it being okay to ask for help. And it's really interesting because in business, I think a lot of people, like in no other area of your life, would you try to work it all out by yourself. If you didn't know how to, I don't know, start a beautiful garden, you would probably go to a garden centre, or you'd read some books, or you'd ask some people who were already green-fingered, like me. Don't ask me ever because I can everything. But you would ask people who already knew, right? You would use the knowledge and the people around you to expand that. If you wanted to get fitter and healthier and you've been stuck in some really crap habits with your eating and exercise, hands up. That's where I was 18 months ago too. And I was trying to work it out on my own. Well, no, then I saw a PT every week, but I couldn't possibly say to her that that's what I was trying to do because we were working on conditioning. Why would I not use the resource in front of me and say, do you know what? I'm really struggling. I'm not just talking about like body stuff here, just conscious of any triggers for people, but I'm really not happy with the way my body looks anymore. Like I want to change my shape. I've put on weight. I'm eating too much bloody chocolate all the time. I need to change. Like, what can I do? So I think in life, we get there and we ask for help. But in business, we feel like it's cheating. We can feel like it's cheating.
Yeah, because we had this the other day and I was saying that I used to ride to a high level, and when I obviously could ride, but to get to that next level, I had varied, depending what the target was at the time, but sometimes monthly sessions, sometimes weekly sessions to improve with people that were better than me. You know,
right? Yeah.
In business, there's a stigma with it that is difficult for people coming in new and they haven't yet framed their own thoughts around the matter, or they think they've got their ideas sorted and then people start poo-pooing them and jading it. It's very difficult, isn't it? And I think it's that thing to be aware of, that in other industries and walks of life, it's something that is done. And it was good, you said you've got a therapist. A few years ago, people didn't say that. It wasn't something that was done. I think there's baby steps towards acceptance and things being better in a lot of areas, and the same thing with business coaching. But those people that are doing very well have already figured that out, and they're using those people. And the people that haven't taken that leap are the ones that are being held back, and it's by that, you say, like the limiting beliefs and things yourself, isn't it, as well?
And it's a choice again. It's a choice to allow that limiting belief and that story you're telling yourself to hold you back. It's a choice to not have the growth that you deserve. It's a choice. And I don't mean to minimize it for people who, and I understand that I also come from a place of privilege to be able to afford private therapy, to be able to afford coaching. I understand that. Like, I'm not saying that that could be for everybody, but for people listening to this, I'm just saying that not to minimize how it can be for some people and how it can feel like it's more challenging. But it's also about finding the right spaces for you to ask for help. Like for me as an introvert and someone with ADHD who has huge rejection sensitivity, which this is something I'm working on with my therapist, and I don't know if at this point I'm not sure it's ever going away. Like
one day you'll just wake up and it will have worked.
It's just gone. But I'm not a big fan of huge groups because, like I said as well, like the place where you're not in an echo chamber where you're being challenged, if that's around lots of people, I will shrink, I will withdraw. And I know, but again, self-awareness, I know that about myself. So instead, I look for smaller groups where I can really be myself and be cracked open a bit. And this is what I do for my own clients. And the other thing I think I'd add to what you said before, it's just come up for me, is the cheating thing we were saying, right? And how the thing I would say is there's a lot of people who are afraid to ask for help when it's to get better at what they do. So let me go as an example. So if you're a social media manager, you are already an expert in helping people with their social media. So why would you invest in somebody to help you with your marketing story you're telling yourself? Because this means I'm not an expert anymore. If you're a coach, why would you invest in somebody to coach you? If you're a blogging expert, why would you help somebody to help you understand how Google's changed and and the rankings? We can go with this for any example. And I think it can be particularly difficult if you help people with business growth, because in our industry as well, in the service space, a lot of people are helping in different ways with growth, to then say, well, I need help with my own.
Yeah, and I think you're really right on that, actually, because I think one of the sessions the other day, the second episode, that's about unleashing your inner expert. And it's something that, in that discussion, we know, and we know from ourselves, accepting that you're the expert. And it's like Lisa says, being the expert in the room, not the whole world. There was always going to be people that know more than you. But accepting yourself as an expert is very difficult, and stepping into that. And that's what we were talking about in that episode. But to then say, yes, I'm an expert and I still need help with it,
it feels raw.
Yeah, that
feels like someone's just cut open a big gashy wound and gone, that you've worked so hard to get to the point, and the mindset of going, I'm an expert, and to say I'm an expert in this, and then you're going, but, and every ounce of your being is going, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. But that's stopping you from growth. It's holding you, again, it's a choice. And the reason I like to share this kind of stuff is like we said before, like the self-awareness. Like, if I'd never heard anyone talk about that or say that, or, I might never have thought the same and been like, do you know what? It is okay to ask for help anyway. Like, I help my clients to make more money, to work less, to streamline, to systemize. And then some of the things I take to my coach are, right, I want to work on my strategy for the next month because I feel like I fucked it up. Like, or I planned this 12 months in advance, but I've changed my mind and now I don't know what I'm bloody doing. Like, help me. Like, or I want to generate another 5-10K in sales before the end of the month and I need some ideas, help. Like, because as well, especially if you help other people and you outsource and they outsource their thinking to you and you help them with that, sometimes you don't have a lot left in the tank for yourself, especially when you then take into account life. So it's not just about running your business, it's also about all of the other things. And for me, just to sort of share openly, the last 6 months for me, I'm okay now, but I wasn't in October, November. I went through a really horrible breakup in the middle of running an in-person retreat for 8 women, which how I pulled that off, I still am not really sure, but I did a bloody brilliant job. It's the best one I've ever run. Like, it was amazing. But there's also the part of being like, when life's busy and there's other stuff going on, it's okay to be like, actually, I need support here. And if that is help with your thinking, coaching, mentoring, the strategy of your business, what's wrong with that?
No, you're really right on that, aren't you? And I think it's just that having this realization, isn't it? And rethinking how things can be. Something I want to pull you back to, actually, is when you talked about being privileged, have therapy and a coach, because it's a choice, in your own words. So yeah, it isn't you being privileged, it's that you've made that choice to invest in that, haven't you, in yourself?
Yeah.
And if people were to think, oh yes, that's a privilege, it's not, it's a choice, and you've in likeliness made some other
sacrifices so that I can do that. Yeah, I've chosen, that's a lovely reframe, like I've chosen to make it a priority. And I think this can come up for a lot of people when they're looking to invest in their business, like whatever that's in, or themselves. I can't afford it. I don't have time. I challenged my therapist on this the other day, right? Bless her. She was literally like, okay, Nicole, we're not here for this. But thanks.
It's about you, Nicole. Not
yeah. And she was just like, I did not expect that. I was like, sorry, I got a bit carried away. I was feeling a bit feisty. And I sort of said, she said, oh, how's your weekend been? And I said, oh, I did like a 1,000-piece puzzle with my cousin in 5 hours. And I love like jigsaws.
Me too.
And she was like, oh, I love jigsaws, but I've like never got the time. And I was like, that's not true, is it? Let's be honest. Like you're making other choices. And she was like, okay, we don't need to go there. It's like, but you're choosing.
Your time's up. Up you go.
Yeah.
I say exactly the same, but to be fair, part of my puzzle thing, it's not so much the time, it's the fact I've got a toddler and he doesn't respect the little individual pieces or the ones that you've put together. So, you can't be...
That would drive me...
halfway through.
That would drive me like banana. That would drive me mad. That I was like, yeah.
It certainly is torturous.
And if you like to puzzle, I don't know if you've ever tried those puzzle mats that you like can roll.
Yeah, I do need to.
But they don't really work.
I think, putting everything back together and that would drive.
Yeah, it's just,
so someone needs to invent a better option.
I think it's like really high that no one can get to, like like a flat adjustable desk thing.
Get a standing desk solely for puzzling.
Yeah, exactly.
Quite an investment, that. What do you think? You talked about being an introvert and having ADHD, and obviously, in what we do, we have to be very visible in business.
Yeah.
How do you think that's impacted your growth of your business and how you've grown and how you've been comfortable or uncomfortable, as the case might be?
Well, I was incredibly uncomfortable at the beginning. I'd say my first business grew from mostly word of mouth and referrals and people that I already knew, which is how the majority of people start their businesses, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But what it meant is that then I didn't put effort and energy into my marketing because I thought it was hard, right? I didn't want to be exposed and raw and open and share and visible. Like I didn't, but my introvert was going, that's not safe. Don't do that. And also the evidence was, you're full, you don't need to. You've already grown an associate team, you don't really need to. So for 2 years, I was on LinkedIn, which is my favourite hangout, but I wasn't that active on there particularly, not really. But it got to a point where, for me, I sort of flipped it around to, my driver is to have, it's a bit cheesy, but with my psychology degree, the reason that I did my psychology BSc was because I wanted to make a difference to people. I wanted to help more people to have better lives, to be happier. That's what I wanted. I want to have that positive change. So if I was choosing to allow my introversion to hold me back from being visible, I was also choosing not to help more people. So it's the choices that you're making. So actually I can choose to find a way to show up and be visible that suits me, and therefore I can help more people. And to be honest, at the time I didn't realise this was as linked to a sort of ADHD, which I know now, but there's also that rejection thing. So part of obviously building a personal brand as well is that vulnerability and openness to grow the know, like, trust. When I would share like the more open and vulnerable stuff, I would literally have to put myself to bed. Like my nervous system was going, what have you just done? Like, this is really unsafe. Like you need to actually go and lie down in a dark room so you can't be attacked. Like, so there's the awareness of it. So now I know that if I'm going to put something out like that, and that happens a lot less now, but there's always new things that come up as well, right? So you never know what those things could be.
Metaphorically, on episode 3, Andrea did put herself in a cupboard. So I've now metaphorically said it's, people have put themselves in that cupboard, but they haven't done the post first. They haven't gone out there and done it. And she actually did the vulnerable post for the first time on LinkedIn, and went and sat in a cupboard because of it until her husband got her out. So it's really interesting to hear you say that same thing of like,
it's normalising it. It's normal to feel. It's unless you're. I don't think I'm kind of thinking of an example like of where this would be normal. Where else would you share some of the most difficult things that you've ever been through, to build relationships and to help people as well when you're building that personal brand, particularly if you're a coach, right? And then leave that to be open and exposed and judged and
Rolled
by thousands and thousands of people. Like, where else in our history of coming from, cavemen, running away from a lion, a tiger and a bear, like all of that, where else have we done this at that scale and that quickly? Like, and the other thing that's really is cruel, but it's obviously it is and it isn't, but those are the kinds of things that are always going to get more visibility.
Yeah.
So you do it and you're proud of yourself, but then you've got this like pull between, well done, you did great. Like, what?
Something I'd love to ask you, particularly because of your, well, not just because of your ADHD, but partly because of that. A lot of people are all getting diagnosed and things at the minute. And I know that one of the things that my understanding is some people get to the point like they can be very focused in it, but at the same time, some people really struggle with getting distracted and things. Have you got any like routines and things that help you particularly to be productive if you are in a distracted state?
Yeah, move my body.
Okay.
If I'm feeling really distracted, usually it comes from when I haven't been looking after, like, there's the basics of life. It's usually when I haven't been looking after myself particularly well. So, which happens, life happens, right? So if I haven't been exercising, and I don't do any, like, I do yoga and I walk, like it's not high intensity stuff. Again, put your body into threat state because it's the cortisol that's released from that high impact. That's not great for me. If I haven't been drinking enough water, if my sleep's not been great, if I haven't eaten, again, all things that when you have ADHD, very easy to forget to do if you're in a hyperfocus or whatever. So what can happen is you go from this place of being in hyperfocus, it's like this up and down. You're like, I'm so focused, this is all going on, but I forgot to eat, I didn't sleep well, I didn't drink enough water, I didn't move my body. So then you dip into, I'm distracted, I'm overwhelmed, I don't know what to focus on, I feel really scattered, I'm in freeze, I can't, like, for example. So the thing that helps me is awareness, first of all. So, okay, well, yesterday I had this day where I was on fire. So today's okay for the energy to, like, that's 150% of what a neurotypical person would be able to do when I'm in that hyper-focused state. Most people with ADHD will probably have heard, how do you ever get that much done? How do you, that's when you're in your hyper-focus, in your flow. When you feel that dip, move. The first thing to do is probably take a massive sip of water, then move your body. And it doesn't have to be that you're moving your body and you're running or you're going for like an hour's walk. Like, dance, shake around, like just move, go and get some fresh air, walk around for 5 minutes at a quicker pace. Like, it's moving the stress around that you've created and sort of thing. And then the other thing that kind of helps me come back into focus when I'm feeling that distraction and I've done that is to put on music. And it's interesting because I quite like to work in silence, but when I'm struggling to focus on something and I feel distracted, either old school R&B, like history gets me, like, love that, depending on what I'm doing. But that's okay if I'm doing more like, say I was doing like books or admin or something that's a bit more routine. For me, that doesn't require as much critical thinking. Yeah. But if I'm doing the stuff that requires more thinking, like writing content or giving feedback to clients or whatever the thing is, I love binaural beats.
Okay.
So it's like, if you've heard of like brown noise, pink noise, but I like binaural beats.
White noise.
Well, I have to have white noise to sleep as well, interestingly. But it's something that really helps me to kind of, because when I've got that on, it helps me to zone in.
Okay. And that's really interesting, isn't it? Because like you say, you've learned that it's not even just music. It depends on what you're doing as to what really makes the difference for you. So that's really helpful for people. What would you say is the best thing you've done in your business to really shift things?
Oh, I'd say it's like, and I'm still on this journey actually, it's about shouting louder and owning my expertise, because that's not easy to do. That's not an easy thing to do. It's about, I don't know if people set words for the year. I like intentions and words for the year that I do. Bolder and braver are my words this year. And I think we can, especially with, if you're an introvert, if you're ADHD, and even if you're not, it can be really hard to shout about your expertise. So the best decision I've ever made is to just continue to be louder and bolder and braver. But in my way, so as an introvert, except, it's not about doing this. Maybe when we talked about comparison, how you see other people doing it, it's about learning more about myself and what I need. So not only can I do that for myself, but that means that the ripple effects and the impacts I have on other people is bigger.
Yeah, that's fantastic, isn't it? And I think it is that thing of, it does come down to knowing yourself, doesn't it? Because I think, in a lot of areas of life, you can get away with, and if you've got a job, you can get away with doing it the way it should be done, if you like.
Mm.
And business, having your own business, the sooner you step into your own superpower with it, the better, because people are buying from people, they want to know the real you, or certainly as real a you as you're comfortable putting out at that time, perhaps.
Well, that's the other thing with that. And we were talking a lot about like the vulnerability and sharing. You're always in control of this as well. So, yes, to build the know, like, trust factor. But what happens for a lot of people is they're so scared that when they start to share anything, they lose all their privacy. Like, you can always choose the things that you talk about and that you don't talk about. And like I mentioned earlier on the podcast, like, about my breakup that happened in October, November, and it like crippled me. I couldn't talk about it at the time. And one of the things that I always look at, especially with that more vulnerable stuff, is to share from the scar and not the wound. That is somebody else's, and I don't know who. I can't credit them. I'm sorry, but I'm sure it's somebody like very influential. And but yes, share from the scar and not the wound, because when the wound is still open, if somebody prods it, the vulnerability side and the trolls and whatever, it feels raw. But if it's scarred over and you've got through it now and you've got the lessons and the challenges happened and you've moved through it and you're on that journey, you've moved forward, it doesn't matter if it might be a little bit sore, if somebody prods it a bit, but nowhere near the same. So it can kind of just bounce off you then, and you can...
Yeah, that makes real sense, doesn't it? And it comes back to that doing your work on yourself, because you need help heal the wounds to become scars to be able to do that. And interestingly, when you did say about your breakup, and I'm sorry to hear about that, it's amazing what you can do when your back's against the wall, isn't it? Like, you managed to deliver that epic retreat when the odds were really stacked against you.
I mean, it was literally like the retreat finished on the Thursday, and I went to pick up all my stuff, including all the furniture, on the Friday morning, right? So I told people when they arrived that I had some stuff going on. I was also had day one of my cycle, for any women listening, which was just a shit show. At the same time, when everybody turned up, I was like, great, thanks, Mother Nature and hormones. This is brilliant timing, exactly what I needed.
What are you trying to do to me?
Exactly, it's just cruel. Put my back up against the wall even more. You've glued me to it now, like. And at the end, when I said to them, like, actually, I'm going to tell you guys what's been going on, because I want to just be open with you. Some of them cried. They were like, how have you been here for us this week and done this? And I was like, part of me doesn't know, but to be honest, but you've also been like the most beautiful distraction from everything. And I love doing this. I love being here. I love supporting people. So thank you. And they were so emotional. And you don't know what you can do until your back's up against the wall. And interestingly, I went to my coach about it the week before, and I was like, I need an emergency session on this. Like, this is like, something's come up and next week's going to be really hard. And I took it to the mastermind that I was in as well with my coach. And they were all like, Nicole, you're going to surprise yourself. You're going to be fine. You're going to probably be more than fine. And at the time I was thinking, shut up.
I just tell you what I want to hear, but that group don't do that because you said that.
No, exactly. But even then, I was still just like, oh, yeah, I'm not sure I will be okay. I'm not sure I am going to be able to do this. And they were right. The stuff you can pull out of the bag when you have to. And the other thing I'd say on that, and I probably shouldn't say this, but my clients don't need 100% of me. And I think 100% of me is a lot. It's someone with ADHD, right? Especially.
I was going to say that, and that's the ADHD in you as well.
Yeah. So when I was, and this, I want to share this because life's going to happen sometimes. And I think what can happen for a lot of people is when life happens, you can feel like you have no choice but to pull back, which I get because you're looking at your resources, your capacity, your mental capacity, your time, and you're going, I just can't. But you will be really surprised at what you can do when you're pushed. And the other thing I would say on that is, think if you are neurodiverse, even if you're not, there's this whole thing is like you either go 100%, you go all in, or you're all out. Like, you can still deliver at, say, 70%, and no one's going to even notice the difference.
And you'll probably feel much better if you do.
Right, because you're not, it's burnout, right? 100% all the time. You can't give 100% to everything all the time. So there's also that part that if
I've had any reason to try.
Yeah. Yeah. Just,
and you do feel it, don't you? And yeah. Interestingly, I had a message from one of my teachers the other day. We were on about business, and they'd said that they like hearing the business stuff and the health mindset stuff that I post. And then I'd said something about this and how some of the people have, had strokes, and, I want to try and stop people having that burnout in business. And he said, oh yeah, be careful, because then some business owner story, someone he knew that had loads of cars, and when he was 50, I think I need to reread the message, but I've got a feeling he died at 50 because of this, real effort he put in. I thought I think you guys are part of the problem, because I was told for so many years to work really hard, and now you're the one.
So that's the point I was saying at the beginning. It's like when there's a thing about like working hard, and this whole thing like you don't have to work hard if you've got a work hard driver. Like, you don't have to work hard to earn money, for example, as a classic thing that comes up. And you're like, actually, do you know what? You do have to put the hard work in, but it doesn't have to feel excruciating. It doesn't have to feel as hard as it does. I think that's the tweak that I'd make to that. So you can achieve what you want to achieve without working as hard, but it's probably not because you're not doing the hard work. It's probably because you made it feel easier. And that's the blend of what I look at with my clients, when it's, yes, this is what you need to do. You need to market yourself. You need lead generation. You need strategic offers. You need a funnel. You do need all of that. If that scares the crap out of you, let's make it feel easier. Let's go there. Let's figure out what's going on, what's coming up, what feels like it's holding you back. And there's, again, I love the personal development space, but there's a lot that it can answer for with these phrases that it puts out to help a particular type of person that then we can generalize to ourselves that do not serve the story we need to be telling ourselves. So again, it's just that awareness and being more curious, I guess, of saying, oh, like, is this for me?
Yes, yeah, because like you say, everybody's speaking to a specific niche in theory, and you might be the person, but you've read it, so, then you've put it on you, and it wasn't meant for you, really.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, that's really useful. So are you doing any more retreats coming up soon?
I have got one next week, actually, which by the time this is out, it would have been last week, yeah. But then I've also got one in November in the Cotswolds, which is, oh my gosh, it's such a beautiful experience. And we're in a new location this time, a new house, which is just incredible, for eight women maximum, small groups. Yeah, that's in November.
We'll share the link for that to make sure.
Oh, thank you.
Get that. So that will be below. So have you got any plans in your business, and are they written down?
I am strategic, so I love to write things down. I've got 500 million notebooks. I've got a Remarkable. I've got notes on my phone. I've got Google Docs. There's ideas everywhere. Classic ADHD, 5 million tabs open. Physically,
I got Remarkable. Stops me writing on scraps of paper everywhere. Envelopes, back of envelopes was always one for me.
Oh my gosh, yes, back of envelopes. But I got my Remarkable, and I started classic ADHD again. I used it for about 3 weeks, and then I've forgotten about it, and it's not charged. But yes, in answer to your question, I do write things down mostly. Sometimes, though, I'd say the ideas like percolate in my head for a bit, and I tend to think better if I'm on a walk, or I've been out for a walk, if I'm having a conversation with somebody. So for me, usually when I write something down on paper, it's not so much because it's an idea, it's because it's something that I'm going to make happen. Like,
yes, it's kind of happening by then.
Yeah.
Much an idea.
Yeah.
I like that. Very much so. It's been absolutely fantastic having you here today, and I appreciate it so much. Well, obviously, you're a big personal development fan, as I am, so I'd love it if you could share a must-read, an opinion of yours of a book someone must read, whether it's business or personal development, because we need both for business.
I so agree. One of the things I'd say, well, oh gosh, there are lots of options, but the one that I would say that has moved the needle for me the most in terms of personal development and how that impacts my business is Period Power by Maisie Hill. Okay. So we haven't really touched too much on like hormones and that kind of thing, but as women, I wish this was the stuff they taught at school. Like, I wish that we understood that through different phases of our cycles, every single month, like it's not the same for men, like every single month, it changes. Our motivation changes, our drive changes, our commitment levels change, like our inspiration and ideas, like all of that can fluctuate hugely week on week. Wow. So understanding that about myself, again, alongside the ADHD as well, which can massively, the hormones massively can impact how my ADHD shows up as well. Also, I would strongly recommend Period Power by Maisie Hill. It's a great read.
It's going on my list. I haven't read it. And it's interesting because obviously I've been a woman for all of my life and I'm 20 years now plus. But I only started to realise recently because I was doing strength training and depending in your cycle, depends how much you can lift. And of course, the problem is, because it took me like 2 years to notice that anyway.
Yeah.
You know, you're like, oh, but I haven't perhaps trained as consistently or I haven't this. So you find excuses for it because you don't realise. And
because you're not aware.
Yeah. And I think it's only like in the last 6 months that I've started to realise, but then not looked into it as much. Because like you say, where do you go for all this information? Like, oh, let's go to Google and this load. So you don't know who to trust anyway. So that's a really great recommendation and I can't wait to download it. That. So yeah, thank you so much. And we'll make sure we share your links below so people can come and find you and get into your world because it's a world that they need to be in. So thank you for having me. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Many Hats of Business, the podcast. Your support means a lot to me. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with your business friends as they may find it useful too. If you hit the follow button, you'll be first to know when a new episode lands. See you next time.